When Stephen Moore wrote his book review of Matthew McIntosh's The Mystery Doc for the Washington Post, Moore, who is the most suitable reviewer to take on a gargantuan experimental book like this, likened it to walking through an art installation, which I think is perfect for this. Fun fact, my very first published review was on the Mystery Doc. I bring this up because Moore's analogy of walking through an art installation fits perfectly for the book I'm talking about today, Instrument for Distributed Empathy Monetization by William Lessard, put out by Kernpunkt Press. This is a book of experimental poetry that actually literally started out as an art installation in Berlin. It wasn't until I got to the very last page and I read the acknowledgement that a portion of this work appeared in Feelings, a virtual reality exhibition hosted at the Synthesis Gallery in Berlin. And if you haven't checked out the website for this Synthesis Gallery in Berlin, go and check it out. It's one of the coolest websites I've seen in a long time. Not that I really browse websites that much anymore, but you'll see what I mean. Bring it up on your phone and just start moving the screen around. It's pretty cool. But for those of us who weren't in Berlin at the time and didn't experience Lessard's conception in the literal art installation instantiation, we have the whole thing distilled into this beautiful little book, which is also just as vicious and thought-provoking, jarring, disturbing, sobering as it is inventive and experimental. For Lessard, he is reckoning with the fact that we are moving away from an anthropocentric world. The human is not at the center of our world much anymore. In fact, it's the machine and the company. The company is used in these poems in much the same way as the capital T, they, and them is used in Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, or the way that Lumen is represented in the Apple TV show Severance. Individuals are starting to be obscured and faded away, and what's superseding us is this personhood of companies.
2, 5, 7, 1.
As Lessard has it on one page, the company, capital C, performs personhood alongside other portfolio assets, alignments, atonements. I love alignments in there because this is one of those corporate buzzwords that come up in almost every meeting I join at work. He also puts it alongside other portfolio assets. And so this synthetic personhood of the company is now its asset. No longer are the people, its employees, the asset. What's interesting is the many ways in which every day, today, we are conditioned and driven to consumerist behavior by algorithms. When I scroll through my Instagram feed, every third or fourth post is actually an ad that's trying in just a split second with its very first visual frame to get me, to entice me to at least start subconsciously thinking about maybe buying a bag of Doritos or taking a vacation or buying some mechanism to improve my posture while I work from home. How many of you have experienced talking with a friend about, let's say, Coca-Cola, and then you get on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and there are Coca-Cola ads plastered all over the place? And so more and more, we are at the mercy of the algorithm.
2, 5, 7, 1.
Algorithms are simply instructions, and they're getting smarter and smarter and smarter. Instructions for computers, I should say. And it's getting to the point where with machine learning and neural networks, we can just load gigantic data sets into a machine, and its learning algorithm uses that data to get smarter and smarter about something. In Peter Valente's Ford, he references Baudrillard in Consumer Society, who said, "You have to try everything, for consumerist man is haunted by the fear of missing something, some form of enjoyment or other." And as we do so often with things that do represent serious topics and serious issues, we figure out a way to trivialize them and make them less than what they are. And this is just part of human nature and our psyche at work, trying to protect us and keep us focused by insulating us with illusions. In the case of this fear of missing out that Baudrillard talked about, today we just refer to that playfully as FOMO, fear of missing out. But as Lessard has it early on in the book, the feeling is a joke swelled with blood just beyond the jaw. That poetically summarizes these playful trivialities that we plaster on a whole area of discourse like FOMO. The actual physical form of this book is perfect for the nature of its content because I actually feel as though I'm holding some sort of company brochure, some sort of employee handbook. As you begin to read through it, or perhaps like I did, flip through it first, you'll see that it looks like a hoard of a bunch of different things that are found on the internet. And in fact, there is a schematic that William Lessard got from Google Patents, and it shows this ominous looking muzzle on top of a rendering of a human head. Now, at first, I didn't think too much about this when I first was reading through and just trying to take in the broad strokes of this book. But it did from the very start strike me as ominous. And I think that this schematic disturbs me because the human is obscured by a muzzle like an animal. The muzzle, furthermore, appears to be plugging the nose and the mouth. The unnecessary eyelid on the right eye only gives the impression of docility, even despair. The human is rendered such that the device is what is prominent. The human is simply a substrate for the device. And of course, they weren't thinking about trying to make this this model for their patent schematic look like a happy, normal person. I know that. Nonetheless, the inclusion of this diagram early on and then sections of it throughout the book, coupled with everything that's being said throughout the text, really highlights the fact that what this is intimating, I believe, is that we are all being equipped with devices that obscure the faculties of a human voice. When the company achieved personhood, it sought empathy to emulsify its being. Subject ingested as data, we begin monetizing in the customer's voice. We are simply just consumer chattel. Sure, we are given the illusion of freedom, of free will, but that illusion is limited to our thumbs only. As I've read through this a few times and considered all of the visual aspects and all of the different key words that are coming up throughout this text, I believe William Lessard's artistic reaction to the deeper realities of algorithmically directed consumerist capitalism is that this artificial figure of the company has become a master-slave relationship with consumer. And our voices are being taken away by the device that simply ingests all of our desires as data.
2, 5, 7, 1.
Listen to some of the poetics that come through, even though it doesn't look like poetry at all. The subject is a basement where we hide our breath, breath piled one atop another, some dotted with words, others holding a lone syllable, broken from a word never born, breath once discarded, rigid with memory. They cut when pinched at the root. Some of this text is just a mashup of oft-used company parlance. In addition to schematics and corporate propaganda, we get diagnostic charts that look like gibberish at first. For example, it says, what do they think and feel? And the only options you can check are no light between syllables or needles carved from a long-stemmed breath. But what I think this is communicating specifically is that we are now at a place where we can take what used to be unquantifiable and we have made it quantifiable. In other words, a lot of these aptitude tests and diagnostics and feedback forms, we've figured out a way to put quantitative values with qualitative input. In Miguel Benassayag's The Tyranny of Algorithms, he says, the other characteristic of rationalism is that it eliminates all elements of reality that cannot be modeled quantitatively. Well, alas, I think we actually have gotten to a place where we've figured out how to do that. Some parts of this book read like Zen koans on which we could meditate for the rest of our lives. Lay across the unspoken. Invite lace vocabularies to travel your form. After going through all of these diagrams and word salads and company hierarchy charts and diagrams that Lessard has culled from the internet and presented to us kind of in the form of the ready-mades of Marcel Duchamp, we come to the section called Subject Feedback, which invites us to give feedback, presumably to the company.
2, 5, 7, 1.
And we have these big empty boxes in which we can put our input. Then we're given a sample response, and we see it handwritten here. And on the back of the page, it's typed up because the handwriting is sort of illegible. This is the final statement of this powerful book. The people who failed us first failed themselves. What do we say to them? Words elbow up and out, forced from a flooded cellar. Curses, phrases, prayers with spiked tails. The people had hello and nothing to say when they still had tongues. A word laced up with string, another glued to a fist. Sentences chase the ankles, awaiting paws the shape of their fang. Bodies round with venom, each word scattering into syllables flecked with foam. Sighs and other punctuation, empty bags too heavy to lift. The people who failed us, always before us, dry leaves breaking at our step. On a sort of Visio diagram that's taking up an entire page, there's a small little section at the bottom that gives us a little poetic comment. It says, the people who failed us are still here as dust. Sometimes I carry them in my throat. And I see dust here as a sort of double entendre, because we humans come from dust and to dust we return. But dust is also a prominent material that accumulates around and on machines because the machines are having to do more and more work, which causes the need for them to be cooled down even more, which means that they have to have mechanisms that pull in air and cool the air down to keep all the inside parts. And what's happening is that dust that's accumulating on them and in everything around, say, a room full of server racks.
2, 5, 7, 1.
There's always a little bit of dust in all the air around us. It's just the machines are helping us to see it more visibly. Kind of a chilling and somewhat sensational conclusion to jump to a thought that all that dust you see collected on electronics, on machines, are the remains of the human consumers that they just suck in and use as data. Miguel Benassag is a very reasonable and deep thinker in many different contexts, who philosophizes against some of the staunch materialists who tend to see humans and thinking and feelings and dreams and everything as simply data that can be reproduced. One way he expresses this is to say that the distinction between functioning and existing is essential. The living being exists in contrast to the machine, which merely functions. Compare that to William Lessard, who includes a notes section in here that looks like the end notes to a PowerPoint slide or something. It says, the company is unaware. When asked to describe a person, they retrieve a fist of sentences from the tongue. So whether you care about the deeper topic or not, this is a stunning achievement of art. And again, just as Stephen Moore said about Matthew McIntosh's novel, so the same could be said about this collection. This is finally 21st century poetry that looks like 21st century poetry. I urge you to check out Instrument for Distributed Empathy Monetization by William Lessard, published by Kernpunkt Press.